But recently it was my birthday, and my family got me some packs, just random ones, because they don't know to buy me fat packs or anything crazy like that, so I can do drafts. So they bought me 3 random packs, and I'm going to open them up, and we're going to talk about first pick quality cards and kind of how to evaluate cards within their sets and cards on their own. Now, we already busted this 2015. I haven't seen all the cards yet in it. We talked about a couple. We're going to go through and talk about the rest, this time hopefully without audio issue. We're going to start here with Void Snare. Now, this is a fairly okay aggressive card. It's very strong on tempo, and it's very cheap, but it's a sorcery, so it's only really good in aggressive decks. The next card we've got here is Black Cat. Now, it's 2 for a 1/1, and when it dies, target opponent discards a card at random. So the thing's going for this is it can be a good speed bump early. The random card discard effect is fairly powerful. The downsides, especially for this set, is that this set is hostile to X1s. And what I mean by X1s is X is the power, whether it's 1, 2, 3, etc., and 1 is the toughness. There are things that kill 1 toughness creatures quite easily. So this card doesn't really have that much. It doesn't always net you an extra card. It doesn't block or chump block and then steal a card from them, because sometimes your opponent plays a card that kills it, and sometimes your opponent doesn't have a card in hand by the time you're ready to play it. Now, Frostlinks is a very powerful card. It's 2 colorless and a blue for a 2/2. And when it enters the battlefield, you're going to tap a target creature an opponent controls, and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. It's fine on defense, and it's very strong on offense. I think this is one of the probably better blue commons in the whole set. Alright, Oresco Swiftclaw is a card that's usually good in most sets because it's a 3 power creature for 2. It can often kill bigger mana creatures, 2 drops and 3 drops and 4 drops. But in this set, due to the weakness of having 1 toughness, it's only average, whereas usually an Oresco Swiftclaw is above average. So put over here a card I'd be happy to click. Evolving Wilds is our next card. Now, Evolving Wilds is the kind of card that's exciting in like pack 3 when you have almost all your playables, and you're looking at something like an Oresco Swiftclaw and to replace it with like just a regular 2/2 or something of that nature, because you're not really getting that much of an upgrade in your deck at that point. Whereas Evolving Wilds replaces one of your basic lands. It's not a spell, it's not a creature, anything like that. It's replacing a basic land, and those slots you have plenty of. So upgrading your lands is a powerful effect later. Early on it's not as good because you need to make sure that you have enough playables first. Plummet is a super solid sideboard card. It's the kind of sideboard card I'm excited to have, especially in green. Paying 1 colorless and a green to destroy target creature with flying at instant is the kind of thing that green's looking to do. It's shoring up its biggest weakness, flying creatures, and it's doing so in a hyper-efficient way. Exactly what you're looking for out of a sideboard card. Carnivorous Moss Beast is one of these big, slow late-game cards that looks kind of okay at first. 6 for a 4/5 is kind of underrated, but you can give it an infinite amount of 1/1 counters. But the cost of 7 mana, it's just too much mana to really be efficient enough to really consider early. Shadowcloak Vampire is an okay aggressive card. You're paying the 2 life to give it flying. It is 5 for a 4/3, and it does have flying usually whenever you need it, but still not quite on the par I'm looking at. Hammerhand's one of those cards that has a lot of effects, but no one effect kind of makes it worth enough. It's 1 mana, so it is very cheap. It's an aura, which means there's a little bit of risk involved with it, but it has 3 effects. The creature gets +1/+1 in haste, and another creature can't block. I'm not normally playing this unless I'm extremely aggressive, just due to the fact that one of these effects is usually strong enough to win the game on its own or have a significant effect on its own. Tireless Missionaries is probably the worst creature in this whole set. 5 for a 2/3 is very, very underrated, and gaining 3 life is not the kind of tack-on that I'm looking for. Now, this is 5 for a 2/5. It could be a serviceable defensive card, but at a 2/3, it's just not big enough that late in the game to hold off enough damage to be justifiable. Curd Chieftain is 3 colors and a red for a 3/3, but if you control a forest, it's a 4/4, and you can pay 4 colorless and a green to give a target creature +2/+2 and trample. This is the kind of card that I'm willing to go in early. It's extremely powerful. You don't even need the green immediately. If you're a base red deck, you can just play it, and when you draw your forest, you draw your forest. You don't have to run that many forests if you can get a late... oh, where did it go? Evolving Wilds, it becomes more powerful as well. Leeching Sliver, there was this sliver cycle in this set, but it was never strong enough to play. Whenever a Slavery Control attack, defending player loses 1 life. It's just not there. Wall of Limbs is another one of those cool build-around cards. It just wasn't good enough. 2 and a black for an 0/3 defender. Whenever you gain life, put a 1/1 counter on it, and you can pay 7 and sack it to make target player lose X life, where it was a total power. Just not there. That's a lot of mana to make a small effect. If I had a life gain deck, I usually wouldn't even put this in it unless it was really slow, and then it's not really for the ability so much as just a growing defensive creature. Alright, our big creature is Stormtide Leviathan. It is 8 for an 8/8 with Island Walk, and all other lands are islands in addition to the other types. Creatures out flying or Island Walk can't attack. So, it's a powerful card. It also costs 8. So you have to make the decision here. And I think it does come down to Kurd Chieftain and Stormtide Leviathan. Now, Stormtide Leviathan goes in a heavy blue deck, but it doesn't have to be super heavy, because by the time you get to 8, you're going to have 3 islands. You can dedicate this slow deck where Stormtide Leviathan will win you the game when you play it. I mean, it's going to basically stop almost all offenses except for flying. Kurd Chieftain, however, is usually going into this red deck, but you can be red in another color and just have 1 forest and 1 evolving wilds and it still be solid. I think I would err on the side of the Kurd Chieftain, but it's fairly close. Alright, let's go into a little bit more of a specialized pack. We've got Theros here, and what you're going to notice is stronger themes than the other one. The other one was a core set, so it was very vanilla as far as themes went and synergy bases. In expert level sets, we expect to see a little bit more out of that. It's going to be a little bit stronger in synergy based stuff, and the raw card power will mean a little bit less. Alright, so this is an enchantment theme. We're looking to build up big, strong creatures usually. Messenger Speed is another one of those cards that we saw like before with Hammerhand, where it's a 1 mana, and it's giving Trample and Haste, which seems okay until you realize you're really spending a whole card on that. Now, one of the keywords in here, Heroic, does increase or give abilities, usually increases power and toughness with counters. So enchantments will be moderately playable. This one is not. God's Willing is a card that we're looking forward to. It's 1 mana. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. Scry 1. So this is going to usually stop a removal spell on one of your important creatures, or make you win combat. And then there's 2 other parts. You get a Scry 1, which later in the game can be just as good as drawing a card, putting that land that you don't need on the bottom. And also, with the Heroic ability, it can often pump your creature up, or make your creature larger permanently. Alright, so we're going to put that in our first pick pile. Alright, Grey Merchant of Asphodel. This is the other ability, which is basically Devotion. When it's a 3 red, black for a 2/4, when it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black. So right now, just this card alone drains for 2, right? You gain 2, they lose 2. It's even more if you have more of them. I think that's a first pick worthy card as well. Prescient Chimera. 3 blue for a flying 3/4. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, scry 1. This is also a serviceable card. 5 for a 3/4 flyer is fine. So we're seeing a lot of powerful cards here. These first 3 cards are all cards I would be happy to take first. Feldhide Minotaur is 2 and a black for a 2/3. It's serviceable. I'll be happy to have these in my deck. With the power level of the cards we've seen so far, you don't have to pick it early. But those are the kind of cards that are going to make up the core of your deck. Alright, Borderland Minotaur. Another just very solid card. 2 colors, red for 4/3. It's also Minotaur. There is a Minotaur deck. You don't really need to worry about that as much as that you're just seeing a lot of these really solid cards. I would consider first picking this card, although I'm not usually with the power of the other cards. We have Yokestock here, 0/4 for 1. Not doing much here. Not the kind of card I want to start out in, and not the kind of card I want to run. Bloodtoll Harpy is 2 colors black for 2/1 flying. When it enters the battlefield, each player loses 1 life. This card looks like it would mostly go into an aggressive deck, but really I'm fine having this in most decks. 3 for a 2/1 flying is fine. The draining 1 life usually doesn't mean that much. Either way, it's a little nicer if you are aggressive, but if you're defensive, you're usually not at 1. Benefic Giant. This is a pretty beefy duo at common. It is 5 and a blue for a 4/5 hexproof. Now you could load up guys like this really big and make them quite strong. I think in draft they're too slow, but if you're playing sealed, sometimes he can shine. I've seen people run him to decent success. Voyaging Satyr, one of the best green cards. Colorless and a green for 1/2, untap target land. Just being able to ramp out early and sometimes ramp up unique lands or the 2-colored lands makes this card a very high pick. I'll put it over here with our further first picks. Horizon Scholar, 5 colorless and a blue for a 4/4 flying. When it enters the battlefield, scry 2, another strong flyer. The scry 2 is basically drawing a card. You are really looking at a lot of cards and making a choice on the best one of all of those. Alright, I don't think it's worth it to go in first on the green-white card, or on the 2-color cards. This is a Chronicle of Heroes. It's a 1 green-white for a 3/3. And when it enters the battlefield, if you have a 1/1 counter on any creature, you draw a card. You often will with Heroic when you build a deck around this, but I don't think this card's power level is worth investing early. Ordeal of Nylea. Now this is probably the worst of the ordeals, but all the ordeals enchant a creature, and whenever it attacks you put a 1/1 counter. If there are 3 or more counters on that creature, you sacrifice the ordeal, and then an effect happens. This one puts 2 lands into play. Now I'll put it over here with our pickable cards, but I don't actually think I would take that over these other ones. And our last one we've got here is Arbor Colossus. 2 colorless, green, green, green for 6/6 reach. Alright, I'm sold. And there's upside. 3 colorless, green, 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 Monstrosity 3, which means you get 3 1/1 counters when you activate it. When it becomes monstrous, destroy a target creature with flying and opponent controls. Alright. So let's look at the cards we've got set out here. Now we're going to do them by color, and we're going to choose the cards of each color we think are best overall. Now, black, white, and red are easy. There's one of each. I don't think Borderland Minotaur's in this discussion overall. We've got Horizon and Scholar and Prescient Chimera. So we've got these sweet flying creatures. I do think that the Horizon Scholar takes that one. And we've got our 3 green cards. Now, this is interesting because if we didn't have the Arbor Colossus, which is the best green card and the best card, so we're going to go ahead and take that out. This card is just exactly what we're looking for. Extremely powerful, under rate, or it's overpowered for the rate, everything there. So that's a less interesting pick, taking this super powerful card. So let's talk about what remains. Now, I think, in my opinion, Ordeal is not winning out to Voyaging Satyr. I don't think Ordeal is particularly exciting, especially in the green deck. The other ones have a little bit more merit, the blue, the white, and the red ones. But the black and green ones just really don't push that hard. So we've got 1 card of each color. Now I think the worst card is the Borderland Minotaur. It's solid, but it's not astounding in any way. These 4 cards are 4 of the stronger cards in the set. I think when it comes right down to it, the cards that kind of define archetypes a little bit more are these 2. And I would be fine going with Grey Merchant or Voyaging Satyr. If you were playing triple Theros, Grey Merchant's going to be stronger because of that multiple devotion ability. If you're playing Theros with other sets in the block, Voyaging Satyr is just a better standalone card. So, Arbor Colossus would take it regardless of what format we're playing. Alright, let's bust this last one. This is our current set. Oh, Magic Origins with Nissa. And, so this is the current set that's going on, so which is exciting. We'll talk about the first picks here. Now this is essentially a core set. Synergy is not as big of a deal. So it comes down to a lot card evaluation and card strength. Alright. So we start out with a card that I think is serviceable. Now I take Weight of the Wonderworld a little higher than most people, just because I'm a big fan of removal, even if it's inefficient removal. But we'll go ahead and set that in the probably wouldn't pick. A Crowan Sergeant is 2 colors and for a 2/2 first strike with Renown 1. If it deals combat damage to your player, you put a counter on 2 equal to the Renown number. So you have a 3/3 first strike. I think that's exciting. Now this set is a lot about cheap costed cards. It's very aggressive. Charging Griffin is 3 colors and a white for 2/2 flying. When it attacks, it gets +1/+1. Usually this card would be more powerful than a card like Crowan Sergeant, but with the importance of offense and having a quick defense out, it shines less than it normally would. Titanic Growth is a solid trick. Colorless and a green. Target creature gets +4/+4. This is the kind of stuff that you're looking to have 1 or 2 of in your deck to make sure that you can win important combats and you can use things like regular creatures to kill bigger creatures. Disperse. It's a cheap way to interact. 1 colorless and a blue. Return target non-land permanent to Insider's hand. You are losing a card here, but often you can gain so much out of tempo, or your opponent trying to enchant something, or making an attack or a block So Disperse is the kind of card I am looking to play because it interacts so early and so effectively. There's no limits on it other than you usually don't get a whole card out of it. I don't think Reclaim is playable. You are spinning a card to lose a card because it goes on from your graveyard on top of your library, and you split the Reclaim. Just not there. Suppression's Bonds. So here we've got 3 colors and a white. Enchant non-land permanent. Enchant a permanent, can't attack, unblock, and its activated abilities can't be activated. I think that's beating over the Sergeant as our currently best card. Veteran Sidearm. Now, equipment seems powerful because it's reusable, but you've got to think about the cost. You've got the 2 and then the 1 to get +1/+1. Now, that's not a good deal. You can do it more than once is the upside. Now, the real problem is your opponent's moderately likely to kill your first creature. So how much do you have to pay really to get that +1/+1? Usually you have to play once and equip twice. That's usually the way I think about it. So you're spending 4 to get +1/+1, and then 1 additional any extra times. I'm not usually playing Veteran Sidearm, but I'm not super sad if I have to. Firefiend Elemental. This is a decent card. 3 in a red for a haste 3/2 with Renown 1. Often it can get in that 3 damage to become a 4/3 and be a much stronger threat. I think I would take the Sergeant over the Firefiend, and that has a lot to do with the cost of the cards. But it is a very powerful card. Undead Servant was a card. There's a whole cycle of these cards that have to do with a total amount in your library, or no, sorry, in play or in your graveyard. They seem to be powerful, but after playing more, they're just not really... You're not usually getting enough of them to make it worth it. If they come around on the wheel, right, so after you make your pick and then the pack comes all the way around, sometimes they can be fine, but I don't ever take these early. This is a 3 and a black for a 3/2, and you get another 2/2 for each one in your graveyard. So it's strong with its upside, it's just you don't only see it. Magmatic Insight is a red for sorcery. As an additional cost, you discard a land and you draw 2 cards. The fact that it has the limitation of you can only discard a land makes this card a lot weaker than other versions that we see of this draw and discard effect from red. And that's because while it does take your flood of you having too many lands and turns it into cards, it doesn't turn your mana screw where you don't have enough lands into a successful situation. Hydrolash is 2 colors and a blue. Attacking creatures get -2/-0 until end of turn, draw a card. It's a strong effect. I don't mind running 1 or 2. 1 in my blue decks. It's not super exciting, but it is efficient, and the fact that you get to draw the card does make a big difference. Anchor to Aether is a card. It's a tempo card, but also you don't lose another card on it. It's 2 colorless and a blue. For sorcery, put target creature on top of its owner's library, scry 1. That scry 1 just makes a big difference here. You really be able to get usually your full card out of that, and then sometimes when you scry correctly, you're getting... They draw their card back, so you're not down a card. And then if you scry, and it's a good scry, right, you scry a line you need to the bottom, or a big card that you can't afford right now to the bottom, you're essentially drawing another card. So it's pretty strong. It makes up for the sorcery part. Alright, we got Jace. I actually don't think Jace is particularly playable as a first pick. He's a fine card. I think I'd probably take Suppression Bonds over it. I do think I would take Jace over Recurrent Sergeant just for his upside. But he is a 1 and a blue for a 2/0 creature. And you can loot. Draw a card and discard a card. If there are 5 more cards in your graveyard, you'll exile and flip them over. Now, as the creature, that is actually pretty powerful. And as a Planeswalker, you can +1 to give a 1 creature -2/-0 until next turn, which is fine. It lets you attack into it and means that the creature's usually not dealing much or any damage. You can -3 to get an instant or sorcery and cast it from your graveyard. It's a very close to flashback effect. You can still play alternate costs on it. This effect just isn't quite as good as you'd hope, though, because you don't have that many instants and sorceries usually. The more instants and sorceries you have, the better Jace will be. And then the -9 is you get an emblem whenever you cast a card, target opponent mills the top 5. Which is powerful, but you're not normally getting to that -9 too terribly often. Although you don't have many things in your deck that are instant sorceries, you can just keep plussing Jace. I think he's fine. I think you take him for his monetary value, and he's still playable. But if you were at a high level event, I think I would take the Suppression Bonds. Alright, so let's kind of look at the first pick quality cards we talked about. Throughout the whole set and see what they have in common. Right? Because we've got these 7 cards. Alright, let's go ahead and take... we'll keep Jason, actually. Alright, so what we're noticing about a lot of these cards is that the power level is high, or they're very efficient. Voyaging Satyr falls into this kind of efficiency category, where it's ramping your mana up quickly. I think it stands alone as that, right? When you look at the Grey Merchant, or the Arbor Colossus, Stormtide Leviathan, Kurd Chieftain, Jace, these are potentially very powerful, strong cards that you can help shape a deck around, right? Or something like Suppression Bonds, which is unconditional removal, which you're going to need to fight any of these other cards. So when you're looking for your first picks, you want to be looking at cards that help shape a deck, but will go in mini decks. I would be happy to play any of these cards in a deck of just their color. I don't want to pick a card. Let's see if I can find a good example. That requires me to build a deck around it, even if it is powerful. There's not any good examples. We'll use a bad example. Wall of Limbs. Let's say that Wall of Limbs' ability only costed 1, and they lost 2 times that amount of life. Now it's a decent card, right? So now it gets big, it can kill them. But now I have to get all these life gain cards around this deck, and if the life gain cards don't come around, then this card's not good enough. There's a lot of reasons you don't want to pick a card that you have to build around, especially when it requires an odd direction, right? I mean, in some ways, Voyaging Satyr and Stormtide Leviathan are kind of built around cards. Voyaging Satyr wants you to have cards in your deck that cost 4 or 5, which isn't a big cost, right? You can get there. Stormtide Leviathan requires quite a bit. You need to be building a deck that wants to consistently get to 8 and can kind of kill things off to get to that mana. So you're playing this big creature deck, but it's not really hard to just draft a control deck overall. It's not a big cost to playing this, or it's not a big cost to building this deck specifically. You just kind of have to make sure you keep your picks oriented in a way that are going to support this card, and maybe 1 or 2 other big cards that go with it. Alright guys, we'd love to hear feedback on how this setup went for you guys. If you guys could hear well, all that kind of stuff. I had Ash listen to everything while we're doing this, and I'll go back and watch it. We just want to make sure that the rig out here is working, and we'll be doing a little bit more talking about Magic stuff. We're going to be setting up some games on Ash's computer and a green screen background, or some sort of appropriate background that's not just clutter. And once we get that going, we'll start running the gaming stuff with me and Ash. Until then, I'll be bringing you guys cool Magic stuff to look at, and kind of talking about basics of Limited and fundamentals of drafting.